Hello, you're listening to Andy's Book Club. If you're new here, welcome. This is a show where we go over an exciting book chapter by chapter on a weekly schedule. Every week, I provide a recap of the chapter we're covering, and I add my commentary as we go along. If something requires more explanation, I might reserve some time at the end of the show and discuss it in more detail. So, whether you're studying for a test, writing an essay, or if you're like me, you're just super passionate about reading, this show is perfect for you. As a reminder, this show is available on YouTube, Spotify, and a whole bunch of other platforms. And if you're watching this on YouTube, the links for all those other platforms are down below in the description. Or if you prefer, you can simply just search for Andy's Book Club directly on your favorite platform. But wherever you might be listening from, if you like the show, be sure to follow and subscribe. This show also has a Twitter page, so if I need to post visuals, I will do so on Twitter, so be sure to follow me there. Last week, we discussed Jaehaerys' revolutionary idea of the doctrine of exceptionalism, which stated that Targaryens should be given an exception to the no incest rule since they were clearly different than the rest of the Westerosi. Although it's debatable whether Jaehaerys was himself really the person who came up with this idea, no doubt he had some help from the scholars of the Faith of the Seven. History credits Jaehaerys with the invention, or at the very least, he was the one that popularized it. This week, we're continuing into our discussion of Jaehaerys' reign as king. So by 51 AC, Jaehaerys was really settling into his role as king. He would be described as restless, as he was always traveling around Westeros in an effort to meet as many of his subjects as possible. He was no doubt inspired by the actions of his grandfather, Aegon the Conqueror, who, if you recall, also led royal processions throughout the realm. However, unlike King Aegon, Jaehaerys preferred to be a little bit more low-key, so to say, and not bring as many guards and servants with him. He preferred instead to just ride around on the back of Vermithor and to not be slowed down by having a large company travel with him. The first of such royal processions was meant to be a modest one since Queen Alysanne was pregnant, and Jaehaerys did not want to overburden her with traveling too far. With the king and queen arriving at Maidenpool, Alysanne wanted to bathe in Jonquil's pool, which is said to contain sacred waters and where the town got its name from. However, there were those in Maidenpool that despised Alysanne because they had not yet been convinced of the doctrine of exceptionalism, and they considered her unborn child to be an abomination born of incest. The fact that Alysanne had decided to take a bath in Jonquil's pool was also considered an insult to some, since they viewed it as her polluting the sacred waters. So 3 attackers showed up with daggers to try and assassinate the queen when she was naked and vulnerable while she was taking the bath. And also, they would have succeeded if not for the intervention of Alysanne's ladies-in-waiting, who stepped in between the attackers and Alysanne long enough for the Kingsguard to show up. Jaehaerys was furious when he heard about the attempt on Alysanne's life, and he cut his royal procession short, deciding to return to King's Landing with Alysanne. Back at King's Landing, a piece of good news arrived at Jaehaerys. It was announced that Queen Dowager Alyssa was pregnant. The news was surprising, since by this point, Queen Alyssa was not a young woman anymore, and also the years of trials and tribulations she had gone through so far in her life had taken a toll on her. But to the joy of everyone, especially Alyssa's husband, Lord Rhaegar, she gave birth later that year in 51 AC to a healthy boy, which Rhaegar named Boromund of House Baratheon. But sometimes, when the gods give with one hand, they take with the other. Queen Alysanne would also give birth later that year to a boy named Aegon, whom she named after Aegon the Conqueror. However, Aegon was born premature and died just 3 days later. This was extremely traumatizing for Alysanne, who hasn't even fully gotten over the attempt on her life at Maidenpool by this point, and now she's just lost her newborn child. On Dragonstone, there were tensions brewing as well. Many lords had sought to meet with Rhaena, the Queen of the East, in an attempt to get to know their new neighbor and of course get on her good side for various political purposes. But Rhaena was having none of that, and turned away many who came to welcome her, and her relationship with her daughter Aerea was also very bad. Aerea had grown up apart from Rhaena all her life, so she did not recognize her mother, and Rhaena also knew nothing about her daughter. Aerea also hated Dragonstone and found it boring. Recall that for a long time she was the heir presumptive going all the way back to Maegor, essentially for all her life, and I suppose technically until Jaehaerys has his own child, she was probably still the heir presumptive. However, the issue was that back when she was the heir presumptive living in King's Landing, she enjoyed all the attention she was getting. But now, on Dragonstone, there were no girls of her age around, and she was not allowed to mingle with any of the common folk. The only thing that Dragonstone had going for it that King's Landing did not was, of course, the dragons. One thing that Rhaena did make sure of was that one day her daughter would be a dragon rider, as was with Targaryen tradition. Once, she showed Aerea the eggs that her dragon Dreamfire would lay, and said to her, "Choose one and make him yours, and one day you'll fly." And later, we'll see how Aerea really took that message to heart. In 52 AC, Jaehaerys and Alysanne finally decided to complete the royal trip that was previously cancelled due to the incident at Maidenpool, and together they went to the Vale, where Alysanne helped to arrange some marriages. Historians often speak of Queen Alysanne's reforms to the law. However, this was not entirely accurate since, as the queen consort, she did not have the authority to change laws. However, when she spoke, her husband, the king, Jaehaerys, who did have the authority to change laws, listened. It was no doubt that it was Queen Alysanne's idea to help alleviate some of the struggles of many of the women in Westeros. It was a common issue that if a woman died and her husband decided to remarry, the man's heirs to a castle or a piece of land would feel no obligation to help their new stepmother upon the passing of the father. So when the father died, the son who inherited the land may sometimes choose to kick out his stepmother and leave her penniless and destitute. So to rectify this, a new law was created called the Widow's Law, which forced the heir of a castle or a piece of land to provide living standards for his stepmother to the same quality as was before her husband's death. Also in 52 AC, Jaehaerys took on a massive infrastructure project to improve the city of King's Landing, which many parts of it was languishing in filth or just poorly designed in the first place. Funding this infrastructure project was no small feat, and it came down to the master of coin, the Pentoshi man named Rego Draz, to solve the money problem again. Draz was already hated for his many taxes. To fund rebuilding the city, Draz had to get creative. He implemented a tax on anyone coming in or leaving the city, which proved to be lucrative, but definitely did not help with his reputation. He was now more hated than ever before. Nearing the end of 52 AC, Queen Alysanne announced she was pregnant again. Although a joyous occasion, the timing of this was inconvenient because Jaehaerys had already announced his second royal procession trip. But he did not want to risk another Maidenpool event again, so he forbade Alysanne to come with him on this trip. He also initially wanted to cancel the trip altogether and stay with Alysanne until the child was born, but Alysanne convinced him that he should go, since he already announced his trip, and so Jaehaerys went on this trip alone. In 53 AC, Queen Alysanne gave birth to a girl named Daenerys. Although Jaehaerys had wanted a son for the purposes of having an heir, he was still a very happy new parent. Meanwhile, on Dragonstone, the 11-year-old Aerea Targaryen, daughter of Queen Rhaena, the Queen of the East, was not very happy about the news of the birth of her cousin Daenerys. With the birth of Princess Daenerys, Aerea was no longer the heir presumptive. She would no longer have a chance to ever sit the Iron Throne. Although the Wheel of Fortune turns, and after the triumphant year of 53 AC came what was called the Year of the Stranger in 54 AC. The first death of 54 AC was Septon Oswyck, who we recall was the only Septon that Jaehaerys trusted to perform the marriage rites when he married Alysanne. Many other misfortunes would come in 54. On Dragonstone, Queen Rhaena's best friend and most likely her lover, the Lady Elissa Farman, who had been kicked out of her home of Fair Isle by her older brother after her father's death, had grown tired of living on Dragonstone. Elissa loved sailing more than anything, and wanted to build a ship to go exploring. Rhaena did not share her love of sailing, so denied her request again and again to build a ship to let her go back on exploring the seas. But at last, Rhaena gave in. She could tell that Dragonstone was not the right fit for Elissa, and so Elissa bid farewell to Rhaena. This was traumatizing for the Princess Aerea, since she had been very close to Elissa, much closer to her than to her own mother, and wanted to go with Elissa to explore the seas. But this was something that both her mother and Elissa forbade, since she was still so young. It was only days that after Elissa's departure that Rhaena would realize a deep betrayal. Elissa had stolen 3 dragon eggs when she left. It was speculated that she needed the money to build ships, and with 3 dragon eggs, she could sell them and buy a whole fleet of ships. Upon realizing this, Rhaena mounted Dreamfire and flew to King's Landing to inform Jaehaerys, and an investigation was launched, but the eggs were never recovered. For those of you who know the main sequence story of A Song of Ice and Fire, or Game of Thrones as the TV series is known as, spoiler alert, these are most likely the eggs that were given to Dany that would one day hatch into Drogon, Viserion, and Rego. So yeah, that's where the eggs came from. Yeah, anyways, the next death of 54 AC came with the death of the High Septon. By now, we should all be aware of the importance of the role of the High Septon. If the new High Septon, whoever it might be, is against the crown and threatens to fan the flames of the Faith rebellions again, this could spiral into an existential crisis for the Targaryens again. So Jaehaerys was not about to take the risk of letting the cards fall where they may. So Jaehaerys and Alysanne both mounted their dragons, Mermathor and Silverwing, and flew to Old Town. The arrival of Jaehaerys and Alysanne on their dragons must have done the trick, as the most devout, who are the Council of Septons who are responsible for choosing the next High Septon, chose Septon Alfrin, who was a champion of the doctrine of exceptionalism and had traveled Westeros on behalf of Jaehaerys, promoting the doctrine of exceptionalism. This was great news for Jaehaerys, who can breathe a sigh of relief that the faith would still be on the crown's side for the foreseeable future. But once again, the wheel of fortune turns, and it was at this point that a raven arrived from Storm's End with bad news. Queen Dowager Alyssa, while trying to give birth to a second child by her husband Rhaegar, was having great difficulties. She had gone into labor a month too early, and the fetus was stuck. She was too old and weak to push. Most likely she would not survive. Upon hearing this news, Jaehaerys and Alysanne rushed to Storm's End only to find Lord Rhaegar in despair. The Maester said that Alyssa would most likely die as she was beyond saving, but there was a chance that the child may live if they perform an emergency C-section. So recall that this is medieval-style medicine, so C-sections usually will kill the mother. This isn't like a regular C-section that we have now in modern medicine. So reluctantly, Rhaegar gave the order to save the child and in effect condemn his wife to death. And thus, Queen Dowager Alyssa died in childbirth in 54 AC. Her prematurely born child was a daughter. She was so small and weak that many feared she would also not survive, but to everyone's surprise, she did, and Rhaegar named her Jocelyn. It was the dawn of the next morning after Alyssa's death did Queen Rhaena arrive at Storm's End on the back of her dragon Dreamfire. She had come too late and did not get a chance to say goodbye to her mother. In a fit of rage, she blamed Rhaegar for getting Alyssa pregnant and wanting another son, and for issuing the order to save the child instead of his wife. In reality, this was somewhat of an unfair accusation. Even if Rhaegar had wanted to save his wife instead of the child, this was not going to happen. The Maesters had all agreed that Alyssa was going to die either way. So it was more of a matter of saving his child or letting both Alyssa and his child die. So in my opinion, Rhaegar didn't really do anything wrong, but that's not how Rhaena saw it. The return from Storm's End to Dragonstone was a sad time for Rhaena. Her daughter Aerea was misbehaving, no doubt venting her anger and frustration at Lady Elissa's departure. Aerea had been, again, much closer to Lady Elissa than to her mother Rhaena. And also, Rhaena's marriage to Androw Farman was also not going well. Recall that the commonly agreed theory was that Rhaena never loved Androw at all and only married him so that she could be with her true love, which was Lady Elissa. But now that Elissa was gone, her marriage to Androw was not only loveless and pointless, it was frustrating. The couple not only slept in different rooms, but in entirely different parts of the castle. Androw had gained a significant amount of weight and was not what ladies would find attractive, at least physically. It didn't help that he also didn't possess any particularly notable skills. People did not respect him as a lord consort to the Queen of Dragonstone. It appears that Elissa was really the glue that held Dragonstone together. She was the best friend of Rhaena, Aerea, and Androw, so her departure really took a toll on everyone. For his part, Androw had tried to make an effort to be more active in Rhaena's life, but at every opportunity, Rhaena had belittled and ridiculed him. When news came of Queen Dowager Alyssa's impending death, Androw had offered to come with Rhaena to Storm's End, but Rhaena soundly rejected his offer, saying that he's only gonna fall off the dragon. All these insults eventually got to Androw's head, and it was in the autumn of 54 AC when many people on Dragonstone suddenly fell ill and died. Curiously, all the victims were women. When the news of the suspicious deaths reached the ears of Rego Draz, Jaehaerys' master of coin who is from the free city of Pentosh, Draz recognized the symptoms of the victims immediately. It was no sickness, it was poison. Upon investigation, it was revealed that Androw had poisoned the women. It was revenge against all those years of insults and disrespect that Rhaena had shown him. He decided that he needed to get back at Rhaena by killing her friends. Upon the discovery of his crimes, when Rhaena showed up with guards to arrest Androw, he threw himself from the window of his bedchamber and plummeted to his death. Rhaena ordered his body to be hacked to pieces and fed to her dragon. Queen Alysanne flew to Dragonstone to try and comfort her sister Rhaena, but everything was just an absolute mess. Rhaena was not in the mood to see anyone and tried to turn Alysanne away 3 times. When Alysanne refused to go, Rhaena retreated to her chambers and would not see anyone. Princess Aerea was also a mess. She was jealous that she was no longer the heir, but at the same time she wanted Alysanne to take her back to King's Landing since she hated Dragonstone. Rhaena forbade this, of course, and this led to more animosity between the mother and the daughter. Alysanne, seeing that her efforts were in vain, was forced to return to King's Landing, having achieved nothing in terms of helping mend the relationships that were totally broken on Dragonstone. As 54 AC drew to a close, back in King's Landing, the work on the Dragon Pit, a huge dome that was specifically built to house the dragons, was all but complete, and a great feast was thrown to celebrate. However, this feast was interrupted by the sudden and unexpected arrival of Rhaena on the back of Dreamfire. The Princess Aerea had disappeared. She had finally, like Rhaena said, claimed her own dragon and flew. The problem? She mounted Balerion the Black Dread, the very same dragon that killed her father, Aegon the Uncrowned. Rhaena was in a panic, and after confirming that nobody in King's Landing had heard of or seen Aerea or Balerion, she departed once again, trying to find Aerea. And for the remainder of 54 AC, neither Rhaena nor Aerea was heard from again. Okay, so that's it for this week. Things are getting exciting. We're getting to the exciting parts of the reign of Jaehaerys. I hope you all enjoyed, and yeah, I'll wrap it up here and see you guys next week. Stay tuned.